I know that it's always come back to how much I can raise the rents. I mean, I'm pretty much in market and I'm just raising a little bit now every year. Uh, but I do feel like I need to provide more value because my park don't really have a lot of stuff out there. And I'm I'm debating if to put those 50, 60 grand into, into stop the dust coming out because that's the main complaint that people get dust. Mine is not even so much gravel. It's kind of like it's a gravel mixed with I guess just the land. So not sure what your intake about that. When are you making the decision to actually go and do that and improve? And would you recommend to go with chip seal and compared to paving? And and what's the best process to do that if I will decide to go and do that, or compared to maybe do another amenity like a sitting area maybe, or yeah, just some improvements, maybe add more laundries, more laundry machines. So kind of big question here, but yeah, love to hear your thoughts.
Road paving is great. It's necessary. You've got to do it sometimes. Ideally, you do it before you have a bigger rent raise. Otherwise, I tend not to touch roads unless it's really, truly necessary. One other thing I'll say is if you are below market, so let's say you're $50 below market and you're doing $25 rent raises and you just did a $25 rent raise and so you're about to be only $25 under market, I would continue doing $25 rent raises because the market it tends to jump up fast and unexpectedly. And the last thing you want to do is do like $50 rent raises for a couple periods and then $25 rent raises and then drop down to $10 and then jump back up to $25 or $50 rent raises. I had this is coming from experience. I had to do that at a property I bought pre-COVID. And as everybody saw, COVID just spiked rents, and we had to unfortunately raise rent at a higher clip than what we originally had done. So we did like a $75 day one bump and then eased it down to 25 and then all the way down to 15 and then we had to do another 25 to $35 bump and we ended up losing a couple homes. Now we're full at that property, so the homes came back and at current market rates, so it's not a big deal, but it still certainly didn't feel great to lower rent raises because we were like really close to market, within, $30. So we slowed it down a little bit and then the market just got away from us. And now we're having to, I don't want to say get aggressive, but, go back to higher rent raises. So I would say just as you're approaching market, just keep that in mind. And then in terms of the roads, again, like, I would delay until the market kind of goes up again, right? Because you really want to match that with a more hefty rent raise if you can. But if the roads are atrocious, different story. In terms of like, should you cool seal it? Should you do this? Should you do that? It really depends. Decal, if memory serves, you're in New Mexico or Arizona. The sun and the terrain are just different out there, so it's really hard for me to speak in a generalistic sense. Um, so what I'll just say is, I would grab a couple quotes, really try to understand what's going on, what, the long-term effects of it, of leaving it versus investing in it, so there's a lot of it depends there. And in terms of amenities, man, it depends. We get a lot of amenity requests that people end up never using. Um, then we have a lot of amenities that, I'll give you great, for example, pools are the worst. In my markets in Florida, we've had pools before. Overwhelming majority of residents never use it. It gets overrun by people from outside of the communities. They come in, they smoke weed, they trash it. You end up having to get a pool monitor. It doesn't matter. So like people say they want a pool, then they never use it, and then they get mad when you have to get rid of it. And I hear gyms are the same kind of scenario where like you have a gym and people drive by it and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's right, I have a gym. I should go. This is great that I have a gym." And then they never go. So all this to say, you got to poll your residents. You got to really understand what's important to them. Things like volleyball, soccer can be huge hits. Benches can be a huge hit. People you love it. They use it frequently. Sometimes you'll install a soccer goal and no one will use it. Or worse, you'll install a soccer goal and it'll get destroyed in 6 months, which is really sad. So, got to pull your residents, got to understand what's important to them. And usually it's not, hey, I installed an amenity, let me jack rent a whole bunch. Usually amenities are more for staying power. Uh, Folks are like, oh boy, we got a whatever. Not like, oh boy, we have whatever, I'll pay more for this. It's more like, yeah, this community is nice. It makes leasing up a little easier. So in other words, like I don't think you can, raise rent dramatically just because put in a volleyball court, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely makes sense. To me, it's more like, because again, it's a 35 space, 38 space community. And yeah, the road is kind of thing that I think I need to do, but you're recommending to just decide to do it when I can actually do. I'm staying about in the market, but I'm in a smaller town when everyone just talk so I don't know. Um, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm doing it in the right time, and it sounds like you're saying it's the best time to do it before I can do like a 50. If I'm gonna put 50,000, so I probably would need to raise rents to in $50 in the next couple years or so. So, but that's what you're recommending is more to do it when I'm ready to, because I know this is like that is the biggest feedback we got is the roads and maybe that add a couple of machines. That's where I had.
So without knowing the condition of your roads, I don't know. I would certainly go and quote it out and try to understand what the life of the roads, how long the investment will be, and kind of just do a quick back of the napkin ROI to figure out if it makes sense. Roads are something people are going to use every day. That's generally speaking more impactful than laundry or a pool. So I definitely would say that's one of the better places to spend your CapEx dollars for sure, especially if you got that feedback. Just be careful because a lot of these paving companies will run up a massive bill and it won't always necessarily translate into happier residents. True story. I repaved a community and the first comment I got wasn't thank you. It was, you need speed bumps because people drive too fast. And I'm like, we do have speed bumps. And they're like, well, they need to be bigger. Okay. All right. So you're never going to be happy. Got it.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I guess if the roads are okay, but again, it's just like getting some dust and stuff. And yeah, it's something I guess like you're saying, the ROI gotta be there. And it's to me more of a long term for people to see the community and like it hopefully better. Um, but yeah, okay. I'll appreciate that advice.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, I'll ask another quick question about the infill. Um, so about the smaller sites, okay? So I done anything I can with smaller sites. So my park is full. I have only 4 vacancies, and there are vacant lots. They cannot fit mobile homes as they're smaller. And my question is like I know. I tried RVs. I guess because we don't have amenities, or maybe my pricing is not including utilities, which I'm still, standing on that. And I think that's why we're having hard time to infill with RVs, tenant-owned home RVs to come in.
Mhm.
So I think that's something that if I would change, but then I'm significantly lowering compared to all the rest of the tenant-owned homes. So I didn't want to do that. So I still try to rent it for 350 plus utilities, but we really get in here and there someone that be interested. So I don't know what your other opinions. I know back then we spoke a little bit about RVs, bringing them in. Obviously, I don't want to be the owner of them, so maybe skirt them and sell them on financing. I know my market is very strong for, I don't know for RVs, but for any type of affordable 600, $700, obviously. So I don't know what your thoughts about those, because those four lots been there vacant for a long time, and I don't know what you would recommend to infill them.
Infill's tough. Infill's tough for a multitude of reasons, especially the price. So if you've got um, if you're in a market that's 50,000 a site and you're going to spend 75,000 to infill, you're in the hole 25K out of the gate. Now your cash flow will earn you back there. But if you're going to spend 75K and it's immediately worth 100K a site once it's occupied and paying and all that jazz, all of a sudden you've got, $25,000 of intrinsic value. So looking at it that way, it can be incredibly exciting. Now, the tough thing are those small lots, like you said, because people typically don't want two bedrooms. They usually want three bedrooms. I mean, I literally have an email right here from someone who's a single woman. She's no kids, she's no boyfriend, no nothing. We have eight move-in ready two bedrooms and one not move-in ready, still needs a little work. Will take 1 to 3 months, three bedroom. And she is literally going to wait for the three bedroom. Just a single woman. I have no idea what she needs extra rooms for now. Either she's lying or she's like, oh yeah, no, if there's a three bedroom available, I'll take it. Which almost would lead me to believe like don't even tell people if three bedrooms an option, right? But when you're talking about smaller lots, oftentimes you're talking about a situation where you can't infill even a two bedroom. You got to do a one bedroom basically efficiency, like a park model home. Boy, are those tough to lease up, market dependent, obviously. So if mobile homes aren't an option, a realistic option, RVs can be a great option if you have zoning. If you don't have zoning, it's a non-starter. But let's just hypothetically say, for example, you do have zoning and you don't believe with setbacks and the price point of a new or used mobile home, it's just infilling is going to be next to impossible and definitely cash flow intense. If you can do RVs, problem solved because you can get away at, in some cases, under $5,000 prepping the lot, and then just throw up an ad and an RV shows up. Now, what it sounds like you're saying is it's not quite that simple in that market. And I have markets where it's exactly like that. It's very difficult to get an RV to show up. In other markets, we have wait lists. So it's market dependent, but if you've thrown up ads, you've tried everything, you can't get an RV to show up. Let's assume you have zoning and all that jazz. You can't get anything to show up. Should you buy an RV, deck it, skirt it, whatever, infill it, try to sell it or rent it out? I mean, you can, but you're getting into the same market of um, that would be really no different than just an apartment efficiency, just like a one bed, one bath basically small apartment. And the tricky thing is like it's worse than that. Because if anybody who's listening in has ever spent the night in an RV, it's just fundamentally different than a stick-built home or even a one-bedroom mobile home. It just feels different. It comes with a different vibe. And typically, if you got a single guy or single girl and they want an efficiency, just a one easy, simple one bed, one bath. They're probably not going to say okay to an RV unless it's dirt cheap or they're desperate. That's what I've seen. And you typically just don't want that. It's just a rougher client base that you're basically appealing to, which is brutal. Um, and then, what if, somebody wants to come buy it and, basically convert, a park-owned home to a tenant-owned home type thing. Same story. Like it takes a certain type of person to want to live in an RV. And if somebody's going to come buy an RV from you, that like, then they're going to want to be able to drive it away. So like that kind of makes things tougher. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that make that a little bit challenging, although not impossible. But what I would say is, you know, throw an ad up, take some photos, try to see let the market tell you what it wants. And if the market is open to doing like a rent to own basically on an RV, do it. If the ad leaves a lot to be desired, then that definitely has you know, dictated to you more or less what the market wants. So in other words, all this to say, like, study the market up, figure out what it wants, and try to use the capital that you have to give um, the people what they want.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Great answer. I would say that I'm allowed to do pretty much RVs or mobile homes. We do have a lot of demands for, I have 5 park-owned homes, RVs in that community because the small lots and they're from the 60s and we rent them in an hour, including all utilities. But again, we deal with, as you say, lower clientele and they're also, which are really good people though, I mean, but they're just a little bit more demanding. And yeah, we just the RV is just a little bit uh I guess selling it is an option like you're saying to check and see. Obviously, I don't know if you're selling those with wheels or not. I mean, because I'm guessing that a lot of people just would like to drive with it, especially so I'm guessing that I wouldn't want them to drive with it. I know as a park on home, if I bring in RVs, I rent them. I rent vintage trailers for in a matter of days. So from the 60s, So I know that I have no problem if I bring a 2010 RV. The question is, yes, if I'm going to be able to sell those, because I don't want to be the owner, and then if they're going to be okay to not drive with it. So there is a demand for those, and we know, but I just don't want to keep park on homes RVs. That's my difficulty. So I guess I'll have to see if the tenant on home models would work. So you typically don't do anything with small lots? I mean, you just give up on them?
I wouldn't say I give up on them. I would say it depends. If you have a growth strategy for a portfolio, it almost never makes sense to infill anything because your capital is going to be better spent acquiring a new mobile home park or a new property. If you are not buying new properties and you're just sitting on what you got, it depends if you are a growth strategy buyer or an income strategy buyer. If you want income, all you care about is cash flow. So, coming out of pocket 50 grand plus, plus, plus to infill is a non-starter because you're deleting out cash flow. If, you think it's going up to $100,000 in value, uh, and you're going to infill it for 50,000 bucks or 75,000 bucks and you got 25 to 50K intrinsic value, that's growth right there. That's capital appreciation right there. So you can stomach, some negative cash flow in the short run to handle that. But Deco, from what I understand about your situation, this is, the asset that you're kind of going all in on. This is something I would definitely try to fill, even if it means you buying something like an RV and renting it out.
I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to get to everyone else's questions if there are any. Deckel, I took you off the stage for a second there just to make sure that there are no open questions from our other members here. Connor, Deckel, Eric, Jen, Nikki, anybody in here who's part of the mastermind have questions. Otherwise, we can open the floor to anybody else. I'll bring you to the stage if you have a question here. And then if not, I will open the floor to everybody else. All right, hearing none, I'll ask Jassy's question out loud here. Jassy asks, how do we increase deal flow of mobile home parks? And that's really a deals question, but since we seem to be lacking participation here, looking forward to you guys posting more messages in there. I'll have Ryan answer this one in the meantime. Jassy, I'll bring you to the stage here. What do you mean specifically? How do we increase deal flow of mobile home parks? You want to ask that live?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, like, if you got I guess, like a growth strategy and you're looking to buy one, two, three, or even maybe do a roll up of mobile home parks, how do we increase deal flow and then control, say, maybe like the debt coverage ratio of the type of deals you have coming through our pipeline so they make sense to buy?
Right. So this is a straight acquisitions question. It's
Yeah.
fine. This is ideally an operations call, but I think this is a great question I get all the time. And I think, I'm happy to answer it. even if it's a little bit off topic, and there's ways I can bring it on topic, which is great. So we'll spend a minute or two doing exactly that.
Sorry
First and
about that.
foremost, definitely tune into the podcast. We address this in multiple different ways, in multiple different, from multiple different perspectives. The reality is you need to have a unique strategy that's effective, unless you can just outpay and just like outbid everybody. So you need to have a unique strategy that's effective and that's market specific. In other words, you're going to want to go an inch wide and a mile deep, into a market, because the more you understand the market, the more information asymmetry that you have. In other words, like you have a competitive advantage. Like let's say Deckel, for example, knows that he can rent um, RVs out, and there's an unlimited demand for RV rentals. Um, what he then can do is, if he knows that mobile home parks have zoning that allows for RVs, and he can go and buy something that has vacant lots, and he knows how much it's going to cost for him to infill those vacant lots with RVs. All of a sudden, he can incorporate that into his underwriting, and he can pay more than somebody who does not have that knowledge. In other words, it's information asymmetry. So, in terms of like, how can we improve our operations so we can hit a better DCR? Well, one thing that'll help you hit a better DCR is more money coming in. So, like, the great thing about, what Deckel might be able to do out in Arizona is specifically that market, is if he knows the permit office, he knows the zoning officials. He knows how to market to, RVs or people who want to, rent an RV park owned home, basically. That information asymmetry can help him strike. Now, obviously, Jassy, I go into a whole heck of a lot more detail in the podcast, so definitely tune in. But in so many words, what you really got to do to find the truly great deals is either overpay or find a way to information asymmetry. And the best way to find your way to information asymmetry is to go an inch wide and a mile deep, pick a handful of markets, study them, meet everybody there is to meet, find those discrepancies between what the market thinks and what is actually going on, and hit it hard and hit it hard. And I'll throw one more thing in to tie this back to operations. Operations make you a better acquisitions person. So true story. When Ian and I, way back in the day, quit our jobs, moved into the mobile home, and grew our business from the ground up, the one thing that was shocking to me was how deals all of a sudden popped up out of nowhere. I was like, wow, like were all these deals here before us going full time? Now, on the one hand, it was that, we weren't working our jobs. We were property managers, growing our dream, working full time in our dream. But another big part about that was just quite simply that now all of a sudden we knew intuitively how much it costs for to cut the grass, how much it costs for trash, what bill back rates were, what to look for in due diligence, because we were doing it on site with our own operations. So in other words, you'll become a better uh, acquisitions person as you become a better operator. And especially if you're a cold caller like I am, those war stories that you get operating yourself, just kill it when you're on the phone with a mom and pop owner, or even not a mom and pop owner, just another fellow operator. Like, you'll find deal flow comes as you really, really know your craft and really, really know your markets, because the relationships get better. The calls go a lot smoother. People know who you are, so they call you before, stuff hits the market. But this all comes down to just inch wide, mile deep. But thank you for asking that question. Definitely tune into the podcast. I think you're going to love it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jassy. All right, we got a question here from Eric. Eric, are you able to speak live?
I can, but my 4-year-old might scream in my ear right now, so forgive me if she does. Hey, Ryan, thanks for everything. You
Of
too,
course.
Michael. This has been great. Closing on my first park next week, and
Congrats.
it's come to my attention that there's some drug activity in the park. Um, I've been speaking to the police, and the chief of police, says he wants to deal with this, and but he doesn't. He's not super communicative. So I'm getting the impression that he just wants me to deal with this. So I don't know exactly how much cooperation I'm going to get from the local police, but I'm wondering if you have any other strategies that you found that are successful. Two of them are tenants that are actually on leases, and one is an individual that is residing with an approved tenant without permission. So I'd love to hear your insight on that.
Are those park-owned homes or tenant-owned homes?
Tenant-owned homes, the parks in Pennsylvania.
So I'm not familiar with Pennsylvania law. In the states that I operate in, for the most part, you can non-renew and force a mobile home to remove from your property without too much issue. Some states I operate in, you can't. You literally cannot non-renew a tenant-owned home,
Yeah,
specifically Florida.
PA, you can't.
That's a problem. So there are other ways to evict, usually things like rule breaking. If you have a lease that specifically says you cannot have adults residing in this home without them passing a background check, that's one thing you can do. Another big thing you can do is just have the police park right in front of the home. It turns out you can partner with local police to, do runs and sit there and do paperwork or, give them tips. And a lot of times they'll do extra drive-throughs or again, they'll just park their car and just tell them like, hey, look, we got, credible, um, you know, tips that drug activity is going on here. Can you park your car here? Typically criminals don't want to be selling drugs with a police officer right there. So that's typically helpful. Non-renewing and getting them out is usually always the best thing to do. I would show them no mercy. If they're late, too bad. I would let them know, like, look, you have unauthorized occupants here. I'm going to evict you for this. I'm going to, start litigation for this. You need to come out hard and fast. They need to think this is unfair, and you need to lay into that. You need to be like, yep, changes are coming. Sorry, the last guy was better. You're free to go ahead and sell. Make it easy for them to leave. Offer them to buy the home. Offer to help them sell their home. You gotta, come in with an iron fist. Drug activity can spiral out of control. Eric, I have a real example of this in Florida. We just resolved it within the last 30 days, where two homes, tenant-owned homes, for one reason or another, ended up selling or just leaving, or they moved in a buddy and it got out of control. And these druggies, and by the way, they looked awful. I mean, they looked like druggies. They started breaking into people's homes and breaking people's cars and vandalizing the property. And it went from this nice, cute community that on a beautiful lake to like this, community where literally two houses and their drug activity just freaked out everybody. And, thankfully, in Florida, you have statute 723 that helps and hurts. But within that, there's a clause for rule breaking, and we got him out for rule breaking. So I'm not sure of PA law, but what I would do is make sure you have a good lawyer, walk them through the situation. And yeah, you got to take matters into your own hands because remember about the police. The police play a delicate game of they're there to enforce the rules and respect your privacy, but sometimes you have to disrupt privacy in order to enforce rules, right? So, like, nobody likes getting pulled over, especially if you're not over the speed limit and, you're abiding by traffic laws. That's a little too much. But the flip of that is, watch a police officer watching you run a red light and not doing anything, right? So there's a balance that police officers have to play. And when it comes to drugs, first off, it's dangerous. No police officer wants to get shot. But more than just that, even if they catch them red-handed in the act, as far as our country goes, it's not like immediately to jail. Like you're not sentenced right then and there. There are plenty of people who've been caught red-handed and a police officer makes a mistake and they get off scot-free. That has happened plenty of times throughout our country's history. They have that in the back of their mind where they're like, it's not enough for me to just know in the back of my mind that they're doing drugs. Like they have to have proof and they have to respect privacy and they have to do it the right way because if they don't and the right, or I guess in this case wrong, defense attorney gets involved and knows exactly how to get those people off or reduce sentences, it just creates a lot of, seemingly misalignment with police officers. And you're like, gosh, they just don't want to do anything. And it's not that they don't want to do anything. It's that, they want to follow the rules and abide by the laws. So I don't want to say, Eric, be a vigilante and take matters into your own hands. You got to do it the right way. You got to do it the legal way. And I'll say this to end off this question. It's a great question. Um, you got to remember these folks are not abiding by the laws or the rules or ethics that you are bound by, which can be incredibly frustrating because you're like, dude, these people get to break the rules and I don't. Like, it'd be great if you could just break the rules and kick them out, right? But you can't. And as unfortunate and annoying as that is, the reality is you are in a substantially better position, right? Like you're about to be the owner of this mobile home park. These folks, they're breaking the law in part, possibly because they have to, or at least they feel they have to, or this is their life choices, right? And because you have something great, to do something great, to be something great, sometimes you have to do things that are also great. And one way of doing that is doing things the right way, taking the high road, and making sure, you know, you're not, doing anything unfair, illegal, or unethical. Even if you know in your heart of hearts, it would be a hell of a lot easier just to get the drug dealers out. Everybody would be better off. Trust me, in the long run, you're going to want to take pride in doing things the right way. If nothing else, because if you do it the wrong way, there's a good chance that you're going to make a mistake and then be in a whole heap of other trouble as well. But fantastic question, Eric.
And have you had success with cameras? Have you tried that?
I have, and I've caught plenty of people doing plenty of bad things, and it ends up being that you can't see them on camera anyways. You're like, oh, he stole a car. I don't know who that is. So like, so yes and no.
Is it ever like a deterrent, even if you put up like
No.
fake cameras? Does it work? No.
The reality is a lot of theft comes from drug abuse, and I thank God I've never had to deal with any substance abuse, but I know people who have, and what they will all tell you is like, dude, when you want to hit, like when you want your next high and you're desperate, it doesn't matter. Like there's nothing that they in some cases don't even fear death. Like you just put a gun to their face and they're like, I don't care, go ahead, kill me. You're doing me a favor. Because I'm so addicted to this high, that, like is a camera gonna do anything? No. That being said, like I always recommend if you can afford it and it makes sense to get cameras, you know, if there's ever any gray area to have whatever happened on film, dude, it can be an absolute game changer. Like for example, I have a GoPro in my car that hopefully I'll never have to use it, but dude, if I get it like rear-ended by someone and they want to lie to a cop and it's my word against his, like our mentee Joe Jackson, he watched me get into a car accident. I was literally parked. Somebody backed into me and then sped off. And thankfully, Joe and I got a photo of this dude's license plate and, like all the evidence in the world, nothing on video though. And it's been 6 months and I haven't heard a word from the police outside of, me all the evidence. And it's just sad and disappointing that, even when you have a mountain of evidence, it feels like, justice does not follow, the more that you kind of have in your back pocket, the better. So I don't say all this to say, Eric, you shouldn't get a camera. You probably should. Just know that it's not going to be a deterrent or a game changer. So in other words, don't spend $25,000 installing a bunch of cameras. Good question though. Mike, who's up next?
All right, we got Charlie on deck here. He asked, and I'll let him ask live if he wants to here. Charlie, are you available to talk?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi.
All right.
So yeah, I'm under contract. Thanks you guys for doing this. But I'm under contract for a park that doesn't have a laundry room, no washer dryers, but they've got a small building that they in the past have had it. And I'm just wondering if it would be worth putting in, a couple of washer and dryers. And it's half mobile home and half long-term RVs.
So that's a great question. I know I own a few outright RV parks, two to be specific. I own a bunch of mobile home parks with a splash of RVs in it. I have owned mobile home parks with laundry, several of them. I are two RV parks. One of them has a full dedicated laundry area. It is for RVs huge. You can't fit a washer and dryer in or around an RV in most cases, and therefore they're unbelievably appreciative. Those longer stay RVs are so appreciative of it. I don't want to say it's a necessity, but it's a huge perk for them. So I would say for an RV park, especially long stays, yes, it's really big. It can be really important. Obviously, it's market dependent. For mobile home parks, I would argue the exact opposite. I would say you want to burn them down. I have had people go in there and have sex. Speaking of cameras, not that you ever want to record that, but the laundry rooms in mobile home communities, at least the ones that I have owned, are just absolute crime magnets. I mean, there's nothing stopping someone from outside of the community from getting in there, from trying to break in and steal the coins, to, doing vandalizing equipment, to having sex or doing drugs in the laundry room. Even with a camera there, it's wild. And then you try to do like the beep system with the key card or the punch code, and you try to do all of this, and then the word gets out, and then someone tells like their cousin or their buddy who's homeless or needs a spot, and he's like, "Oh, you can use my key card," and then they go in there and they do drugs. Like, dude, it's a disaster. Like, I cannot stress enough how much of a pain in the butt it is to have laundry. And by the way, I don't say this owning like crappy mobile home parks. Like we had a four-star community with laundry that had the same issues. So this is this is everything. So I'd be really, really careful. That being said, it is market dependent. Some markets are all about the laundry. Some markets couldn't care less. It's really important to know your tenants, know your residents, know your prospects, and know what they want and what's important to them. And again, give the people what they want. But very strong question, Charlie. I appreciate that.
Um, so it sounds like it's 50-50 almost on that. Market dependent, I guess.
Market and product dependent, because I would also say short-term RVs probably aren't as excitable about laundry as a longer-term RV would be. And even if it was a longer-term RV community, sometimes you can get lucky and there's literally a laundry mat right there, like walking distance, and then you don't even have to worry about it. So I would say market dependent, location dependent, product dependent. Just talk to your folks, see what's important to them, and make a business decision from there.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good question.
Charlie, you had another question in here. I wasn't sure if you wanted to ask it. Had pads selling in the 100K threshold and a smaller part next doors and lower rents. Would that be a good play looking to sell in the future? Even whatever this question is, did you want to ask that? It's a long one.
Was that for me? Sorry.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
asked another
Oh,
question,
oh,
Connor?
sorry, that was Connor.
Oh, sorry, that's
Uh,
Connor. Okay, sorry.
yeah, hold on. Let me send you back to the panel here, and I'll bring Connor on. Sorry, Connor. Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, it's not maybe not the best question for it. I don't know if I fully got the question formatted even in my own head. Um, if you have a park adjoining yours, like touching your property line, you can see it, and you're looking at maybe buying it if you know your offers that you received for your pads or what pads go for, even if they're at a lower rent level, and when you go to sell and you don't get their rent up to your current park, your main park's level, I would still think that would still equate a higher value than selling them alone.
That's a fantastic question, Connor. And it is something that I'm going through in multiple different portfolios of mine. Um, I have a situation where, like in that situation, it sounds you're talking contiguous parcels, meaning they literally touch each other. I have a situation where they're non-contiguous, they're just down the road, but they're a short drive from each other. And what I've basically learned is, whether it's 75, 70, 75 a site, 100 a site, 100 site plus. So a bunch of my stuff in Florida is worth over 100 a site per, if you can believe Cushman and Wakefield. And the interesting thing is, I have parks just down the road that do not get buoyed up when you put them in the portfolio with the nicer stuff. In other words, if you have class A stuff, class B stuff, and then you throw in some class D, class C stuff, the class, a class C mobile home park sold with a class A mobile home park does not get a value promotion to class B. In other words, it does not get buoyed up by a rising tide. In fact, it's more likely to anchor down, if you can believe it. If you have a C class mobile home park, D class mobile home park, and an A class mobile home park, it's more likely that that A gets anchored down to a B. Or worse, what I'm seeing right now in a portfolio I'm involved in is we have three tiers. We have an A class, a B class, and a C class. And we shopped everything, and there were tons of buyers for the A class stuff. There was even a good number of buyers for the B class stuff. But nobody wanted the C class stuff, at least not in its current condition. And what we ended up realizing is like, people were like, yeah, we'll take your C class stuff, but we got to get a discount on the A class stuff or the B class stuff. And we went, wow, that tells us everything we need to know right there going forward, which is if you're going to buy C class stuff, D class stuff, tougher stuff, even if it's a contiguous parcel, meaning it's like quite literally touches it. It is probably not going to buoy up alongside a greater portfolio. It, in fact, is more likely going to anchor it down. However, if you have A class stuff and you're looking at B class stuff, that's a different story. Even if you have B class stuff and you're looking to buy a C class asset, sometimes you can get a portfolio effect and it can get kind of a promotion, if you will. Um, so in other words, it depends. And what it really ultimately is going to depend on, Connor, it's going to ultimately depend on how much work is involved. So in other words, people will buy a crappier looking mobile home park if it's not a lot of work. Tenant-owned homes, direct build utilities, maybe it looks a little bit rough, but if it collects well and it operates really well, it's much more likely to get buoyed up than to anchor down. But if it's a disaster and you go to sell it as a disaster, or it's still like a good chunk of work, it's way more likely to anchor down everything else. Fantastic question. I'm glad we addressed that because that's not just operations. That's a strategy type question as well as acquisition. That touched on so many things. Connor, fantastic question. Did you have a
Well,
follow-up question to
I had
that?
a slight tidbit to that. Like, what if it's
Sure.
not really a different class? It might be a little lower class. It's gravel, not paved, but if it's pretty much like it's an operating park and they're getting good rents and stuff like that on those type of things. Just the rent level's lower, or they're yeah, where they're at currently.
Well, I mean, the good news is you can raise the rent.
Yeah, so like,
So
I feel like that's more. Yeah, it's I would think would be easier to buoy up if it's
if all you got to do is pave the road and raise the rent, I think it ends up getting buoyed up. Yes,
okay.
for
Per,
sure.
gotcha. Thank you.
All right, Connor, no follow-up questions. Does anyone else have a question to ask Ryan right now? We'll bring you all to the stage if you have one. Raise your hand. All right. If nothing else, we might close early. Are we sure that there's no other operational questions here?
Mike, do you have one about one of the new parks you bought?
Yeah, I'm always happy to ask questions about my park. So recently, we've had an individual similar to, I would say, um, to Eric's question that we need to remove from the park for various reasons. And we, we went to him and offered to buy his home, and he did accept that offer to buy the home, but he wants way over what the value of the home is in order to leave. So we're stuck in this kind of position where we have to decide whether or not we want to effectively evict him. We have to give him 3 months to move out because he's been there for over 3 years, according to New York state law. And we can still collect rent over that period, but there's no guarantee that he will pay us rent knowing that he's going to be kicked out 3 months later anyway. Or we can just overpay for this home effectively to remove the resident. And just for additional context, is a bit of a hostile resident in that he's called code on us a couple times for really benign stuff that he shouldn't have called code for. So effectively, what would you do in this situation? Kind of what diligence would you do ahead of making this decision?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and I will answer this question with a story. There's one of my favorite movies of all time is called A Bronx Tale, and there's a famous scene in that where C, the kind of mafioso leader, is talking to uh, the kiddo that he's kind of mentored and takes under his wing. And in so many words, this mentee, he's like, man, this guy in my class, he asked to borrow 20 bucks and he's not giving me the 20 bucks back. And every time I see him, he runs away. And I'm so mad, like how, in your line of work, as a gangster, basically mafioso, like how do you deal with that? Like how do I, go and, do I need to go rough this guy up to get my 20 bucks back, basically? Um, and C's answer is just iconic. He's like, do you like this guy? He's like, no. No, I hate him. Would it be nice if you never had to talk to him again? Yeah. Okay. And is it fair that you just gave him 20 bucks and he disappeared? No, that's not fair and I hate it. Right? But if I told you you could pay $20 to never see this guy again, regardless if it's fair or just or this or that, what do you think? And he's like, that's actually, an interesting way to put it. Look, somebody who's litigious, somebody who calls code unnecessarily, someone who's violent, unstable personality, I almost always lean overpay to get them out. It's just not worth it. Do a cash for keys. It's just, like now, unless you're talking like he wants $250,000 for a $2,000 mobile home. If it's a couple $1,000 and it solves a problem, even better if you don't think he's going to pay you for a couple months anyways, do a cash for keys, save yourself the heartache, hassle, and problems for sure.
Yeah, and in this case, I think he wanted four, and we estimated that the home is probably worth two,
No
five. So
brainer.
I would agree with you there. That was kind of the method we were going with. But yeah, it's been good. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones to close out
I
here.
will I will quickly say though, Mike, one thing you can do is you can tell him, look, this thing is a $2,000 home. If that, like, we'll pay you 4,000, but you got to be out by Friday. And so, in other words, what you're paying for there is so what you're telling him is like, I'll pay you more than it's worth, but I get something for that. And what I get is you're gone faster then you can or should or this or that. And even if he says no, that may open up well, I could be out by the end of the month, which is 10 days, right? In other words, don't just be like, yeah, all right, we accept your $4,000. Make him feel like he earned it a little bit, right? So be like, yeah, well, it's worth two, so no, unless you're out by X date, or find some other way you can kind of negotiate with him there to make him feel like he earned the deal. Because oftentimes people, especially rougher people, will be like, yeah, I know it's worth two, so if you give me four, and then if you're just like, yeah, sure, okay, four, they're like, oh crap, I should have asked for eight. So if you can kind of make him work for it and feel like he earned it, it'll make all the difference. It can end up, making it the exit a little bit easier.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, and it's kind of similar to what you told me about your book on how to sell a car. Even if you love the offer he gives you, go back and say, I have to think about it. So
Yes.
yeah, I love that. That's a great negotiating tactic. I think that we're up on time anyway, Ryan. If you want to answer a question in these last 3 minutes, we're also looking to hire a regional manager, and I would like to hear your take on what the three best qualities of a good regional would be.
So that's a great question, a great one to end on. And I apologize. My Tottenham Hotspurs are about to end a 17-year drought of no trophies. So I'm kind of like holding back a little bit of excitement for anyone who's a Premier League fan. Um, Qualities that, and one of the Man U fans is crying right now, which is lovely. Oh, is that it? We win.
Nice.
Sorry, I gotta go celebrate here in a second. Oh my gosh, that was very stressful. Um, oh man. Okay, sorry. Focus. Yeah, listen, things that I look for in my regional managers, uh, communication is number one for sure. Passion. I want someone who really loves the job, regardless of pay, because if you're just like, it's all about the money for me, eventually you'll quit. If your heart really pulls you towards it, that's how you know you've really found what you're meant to do. And, what I try to hire for are passionate people who I can then go and mold into whatever it is that I need. And I can adjust my back office to them, if that makes sense. So in other words, if you're really strong in sales, but maybe weak in organization, my back office can adjust to that. So just know you're not going to hire anybody perfect, but you can't teach passion. You can try, but you can't teach communication. People either communicate with you or they won't, or they'll talk to you, but they'll only text you, or they'll send you novels via text, or they're non-confrontational. Like, you really need to be able to sniff out people who are in it for money and not for passion. So I'd say communication and passion are probably my top two by a mile. And then if I have to pick a third, I would just say talent. You really want to make sure, even if they, I hired one guy, I plucked someone from the hotel industry, he had no property management, like multifamily property management experience. And I was like, I can tell you have talent in a different asset class. I can tell you have talent. So therefore, I think I can mold you from there. So that's not necessarily a must. I think if you have passion, the talent will come. But communication and passion are just two things that are just absolute musts. So great question, though.
Amazing. Thank you, Ryan. And it is 5 o'clock, so we'll close now. Thank you, everybody, for joining. If you guys are not mastermind members and you want to ask questions in the future, make sure you join. We're actually running a sale right now for Memorial Day weekend. So hop in there and join up if you're not in there already. Over the coming weeks, we're going to have a number of additional webinars. We'll have Metron on again in the next couple of weeks. We will have Elephant Capital teaching us the best methods to cold call and to potentially wholesale deals. I will be on next week doing deal reviews with our mastermind members. So if you have a deal in the next week or so that you want to underwrite together, please join next week with that deal, and we'll take a look at it and give you a green light or a red light or maybe even a yellow light, depending on how profitable it is. So join up next week. Looking forward to seeing everybody there. Thanks again for joining tonight, and see you all soon. Have a good one.
Thanks again, everybody.